We've got a hell of a lot to go through from episode 8. 3 different locations, Silo 17, Silo 18, and the before times. There has been a bunch of little clues and details that have been unravelled in this episode, and I'm going to do my best to try and get every single one of them. I'm going to begin with discussing Lucas Kyle and Patrick Kennedy, who we now know made it to Silo 17. Although Lucas has been shot, they're both okay and they're able to basically clamber over all the bodies through the door and into safety. Now, the bullet, or whatever was shot at them, went through the radio and then into Lucas, basically taking the brunt out of the shot. But that's why last episode, the line went dead, they were still okay, but the radio got completely disconnected. I'm very, very happy these two are alive. Of course, I had my own theory, was the algorithm manipulating things. A lot of you guys said, you know, there was definitely 2 radios between Lucas and Kennedy, whereas I was pretty sure there was only one, and that was through Lucas. That's why they made it clear, just to communicate with Lucas before they went out. So it's nice to know that they are both okay, and the voice we did hear was Patrick Kennedy. All thanks to our buddy from season 2, Solo. Using resources in the legacy room in Silo 17, Solo and the kids are not only able to patch up Lucas, but also repair the radio. What I love in this scene as well is not only seeing Solo and the rest of the kids again, but Patrick Kennedy walking around the legacy room just being amazed by everything on the walls, everything that he can touch and see. Now we get to see the other side of that conversation. You've got Walker and Jules basically screaming at Donnie, telling them to defuse the bombs, and Patrick Kennedy trying to explain how everything is on the other side, that Lucas has taken a fall but he's okay, and Jimmy and the kids are also okay. Just this moment as well where we get to see Jules talking to Jimmy, or Solo. I mean, you guys know how much I love him. He is adorable. Seeing him hear the sound of her voice and her hearing his, it's so wonderful that these two characters are able to talk to each other again, and that we get to see these same characters from season 2 yet again. At this point, Jules, of course, says that we need to reopen an investigation into James's, Solo's, mum. Of course, she's talking in code here because people at Silo 1 track all the radio communications. Solo, Kennedy, and some of the kids are wandering around Judicial, basically trying to work out where this safeguard pipe is. Kennedy, who was, of course, a painter back in Silo 18, notices that one of these metal doors, the paint on it, is oxidized, like there's been heat used somewhere near it. They cut open the door, Patrick Kennedy has a look around, and he confirms it was welded shut from the inside. And then they stop. There is a body in a cleaning suit over in the corner of the room. We learn that this is Solo's mum. In order for them to investigate further and work out exactly what the pipe is and how to cap it, they need to move the body. Just realise how this feels for Solo. He has been trapped in this silo all of his life. He was left in there when he was a young boy, and his own mother's body was there all along behind a welded door. Because Jimmy was distraught and so upset in terms of finding out what happened to his mother, he walks off. He kind of needs a moment to process it. And the kids squaring up to Kennedy make it clear that if Solo doesn't want his mum's body moved, then they need to stop and wait for him to give the all clear. Lucas, who, let's be honest, I've seen it in a better state than he currently is laying there talking to Kennedy. They're working out how to convince Solo to let them move the body so that they can do what they need to do. Lucas very bluntly says to Kennedy that he's the only one that can do this. That frankly, he's the guy that convinced a bunch of people in Silo 18 that it was lush and green outside. If anyone can get someone to listen to them, then it's Patrick Kennedy. I'm not sure if I'm right here, but I think Solo goes home. I'm pretty sure this was his family apartment. It looks really similar to the one that we saw in the flashback in season 2, when he sat there and his mum kind of pats him on the shoulder, if I remember correctly. Kennedy, trying to get through to Solo, talks about the person that he was most close to and the person that he's lost, which is his wife Doris. He says, in your silo, do you have any rituals that you do for when someone dies? And the heartbreaking response from Solo here is, I never knew anyone who died until everyone did. I'm amazed I didn't cry at different points during this episode, because you know me, I usually do. But I think I was so gripped by everything that was going on, I couldn't truly sink into this scene. What I can tell you is when I was editing my reaction, I did cry, and I cried a lot. Steve Zahn plays Solo incredibly well. There's something about him where you're looking at a fully grown man, but it still looks like a little boy. Through it all, he is just a little boy that lost his mum and dad and then was alone ever since, until Juliette showed up, really. And there's something about that is soul-crushing, actually. Kennedy goes on to explain that in Silo 18, they do this sort of procedure where everybody gathers in the orchard, they put a sheet over whoever's died, and then they lower it into a hole in the ground. And everyone else says really nice things about the person who died. If you remember, we did see this with the mayor's funeral. Doris, his late wife, is buried under a peach tree. She'll never see outside, he goes on to say. But her body is food for that tree, and maybe someday the people who eat that fruit will get to live outside, and they'll take a little piece of her with them. He offers to Solo doing that same thing with his mum, giving her a proper burial and a way for Solo to actually say goodbye to her. Now we get to see what actually happened all that time ago. We see the pipe has been cut and that she did it with a handsaw, and then she used her welding torch to basically seal it off. What probably happened is there was more poison coming out than she initially expected. And when she realised that she was running out of fuel, instead of continuing to work on the pipe, instead she turned to the door and sealed that, which of course would have meant she was stuck in there, as that was her only escape. Lukas goes on to clarify for Solo that his dad gave his life to save him, but his mum gave her life to save the entire silo. Almost got me again though. Almost got me again. Nearly teared up. I've got it on in the background. We open episode 8 in Silo 18 by seeing Camille talk to the algorithm. She's sleep deprived, she's fed up, and I don't blame her. I'd be in a far worse state if I was her, probably. This is where the algorithm tells her that the surveillance drones, when doing a flyover, have noticed that Lucas Kyle and Patrick Kennedy are no longer just laying on the ground. The bodies are in fact gone. Now remember, last episode, Knox learnt from Mark Chambers that his dad, Gus, we find out his name today, is not dead. He's not the warmest of personalities, let's put it that way, and when Knox is interrogating him about Harwood and asking what happened, it all boils over and he ends up punching him in the face. When Camille leaves the vault, she heads down to judicial seclusion, where we see that Sims is still being kept. He hasn't gone home, he's been there the entire time. She's talking to him about how, she keeps looking for signs within Anthony that the memory suppression and the vitamin D plus is beginning to take hold. She wants her son to forget her, to forget his father, to forget everything so that he can be away from all this mess. The problem is that's a horrific thing to say. You want your own son to forget you, and you can see Sims is just, he can't even recognise his own wife, I don't think, at this point. She brings up the children in Silo 17 and one last time tries to get some information out of Robert. She pleads with him, I'm asking you why she sent them. Why did she send them over there to get these kids? At the end, I'll theorise about what I think Camille might do here and why she's almost having one last attempt to talk to Rob. Knox tries again to have a conversation with his father, but this time he brings Hanks and Billings. They go over everything that we currently know at this point in time, is that things are being stolen from supply. Harwood is clearly involved and wanted those things for specific reasons. We learn it was just an idea that he had a few years back and he wished he'd never mentioned it, because Harwood immediately asked him to draw up a design and that he was going to build it. Now, speaking of drawing diagrams for things, we cut to a scene between Bernard and Jules. He's basically mapping out the silos and explaining to Jules how he thinks they work. Now, the diagram that he draws doesn't quite make sense. I'm going to go over this again at the end of the episode because there's something fatally wrong with his drawing. He's discussing how would you get a poison pipe to every single silo as a failsafe. And Jules explains where you'd simply run 7 main pipes to each of the clusters and then branch that off again so that if everything goes wrong, you can cut off main systems. And she poses a good question as well. Why build that in? Why would you ever need to kill a silo? At the end of the day, these silos are supposed to repopulate the earth. This is to house people, to keep them alive, generations of people, so that one day we can all go outside again. So why would you ever want to kill off the things you're trying to keep alive? He even says, he wants to almost communicate with them, learn why it is there would have to be this fail-safe, this safeguard procedure. And if it's a good enough reason, they will fix the pipe, take the memory pills, and act like none of this ever happened. They'd be willing to forget all of it and continue as the silos are intended. I adore this scene, the way he comes clean as well to Juliette about Judge Meadows, even by calling her a woman that he loved in his own way, is absolutely heartbreaking. There's a lot of emotional heavy scenes in this episode, and you can see there's a moment Jules pities him. She even says, "I hate this." He says, "What?" And she says, "Not hating you." Rebecca Ferguson and Tim Robbins, I mean, they're just two acting powerhouses anyway, but that scene was so poignant. These are two characters that have been head to head and battling against each other the entire time. We've seen Jules and Sims have sort of more heartfelt and deeper conversations and be on the same side, and now we're seeing this with her and Bernard. Now, when we head back to Camille, she's again talking to the algorithm, except this time it's not blue, it's red. She even says, "What I'm seeing, is that a reflection of your mood or of mine?" It asks, "Did your husband tell you their plans?" She says, "No, but we know they want to stop the safeguard." She wants to know from the algorithm how they could possibly do that. It shuts her down and says that I can't tell you. Now, we know that Lukas at this point must have communicated on the radio, because Shirley says, according to Lukas, Solo's mum used a handsaw on the pipe and instead she's basically going to pinch it. I'm trying to work out how to show this. Basically what that's going to do is create a airtight seal, and then further down the pipe, that's when they can cut it and cap it and basically have a backup option should anything leak through the initial pinch that they did. I'm not very good at explaining this, but you know what I mean. To get to it, they're saying that they're going to need to use a hammer drill, which is going to be very, very loud. So to cover that, they're going to send somebody as a GWP supervisor to check that the work that Teddy did is all good. What they need to do is send up somebody who can pass as a supervisor. At that point, they all turn to Sandy. It's at this point our team of little detectives, Carla, Knox, Hanks and Billings, work out where Harwood's secret project is. They open a very, very heavy door and look amazed. Except we still don't get to see it. We see it in a minute, don't worry, it's brewing, it's going to be there in a minute. The Silo 18 camera points in a particular direction, and when she was outside, she walked directly in a straight line over the hill to 17, and when she was doing that, she could see their camera, but it was pointing a different way. Bernard, shocked, then says their whole silo is turned. Jules says Shirley is going here to open the panel, when instead she needs to go over to the other side. Jules goes after Shirley to explain how she's made a mistake, and this is, I think, again, one of my favourite moments of the episode. Shirley is struggling down the stairs, and Jules just turns around and says, "Are you fucking kidding me?" Of course, her father was a doctor, he delivered babies, so she knows the sort of early signs of pregnancy. She says, "Why didn't you tell me?" And Shirley says, "You would have stopped me, you wouldn't want me involved." And she says, "No, I wouldn't have done that." And there's this moment where they walk off in silence, and then she just turns around and says, is it Knox? Throughout the seasons, we've seen Shirley and Jules when they were younger and when Jules had just gone down to mechanical, and we've seen some lovely moments between these two characters, just to see them sort of on the same page, talking as two friends do. I loved it. It was like the old Jules was finally back, and Shirley got to see that. So yeah, another one of my favourite moments from the episode. Also, we've learned that Knox was the one that removed the not fertility implant, the contraception, which of course explains why there was the scar that we saw on Shirley in early season 3. But it's also quite funny to picture Knox being the one doing that. After an alert, Harwood heads over behind a locked door, and then we finally see what this project was. Harwood got Knox's dad to design an elevator. Whilst Jules is walking up the stairs with Shirley, she gets a call on the radio from Sandy. She says, "This is Supervisor Jenkins. Did you get the welder I asked for, Ralph Melby?" She says, "No, I've got Shirley Campbell. Why?" At first I thought Sandy was ratting them out to Judicial, but it's not. She actually was getting captured. She used the name Ralph Melby as a little clue to try and alert Jules. Ralph Melby was one of the names used in the Patrick Kennedy investigation way back in season 1. There is one final interrogation for Harwood. They now know what he has built, but what they want to know is who killed Orla Kent. Now it seems to be, it turns out, the boyfriend. Have they got the right man? Is there more people involved? I suppose right now, we don't know. What we also get at the end of episode 8 is a lovely scene between Kathleen and Paul Billings. The two of them didn't have each other, and although they were surrounded by people, they were going through it all alone. And for me, this is the first moment this season where we've seen this husband and wife be on the same page. Speaking of husband and wives who aren't on the same page, Jules has worked her way up to Judicial and some handcuffs are put on her by Emerson. She's walked to Judicial seclusion, and who's sat in there on the floor like a naughty schoolboy? It's Robert Sims. Camille walks inside, looks at him and says, "You've made your choice." And then the door is closed with the two of them left inside. Knox insists that they go back to the old plan and blow up Judicial. Walker wraps this up by saying that Juliette would want them to do something and that she doesn't intend to live long enough to forget her. Our first scene of the Before Times is Daniel and Helen getting a bit of a closer look at that drill. Just as well seeing the monumental scale of it, seeing the little people walking all around it and all of them standing there just gawking at it. It's an incredible sequence. All the founders, well, we're not quite sure how many of these people become founders, but they are all sat there discussing this vast project over dinner. It's Per Stensen, Senator Thurman, Daniel, Anna, Helen, Charlotte, and Victor Cernkovich. What we learn is that this digger is the prototype and he's looking to make 9 more, so there is 10 diggers in total. Daniel kind of scoffs at this and basically says, you don't have enough diggers, it's going to be a hell of a lot of work to pull these all the way out the ground once it's dug all the way to the bottom. My own theory is that each silo that we've seen has its own digger, and once the digger works all the way down, it basically can't come back out. That's why these drills are abandoned and at the bottom of the silos in what we know as the digger void. When they ask what this whole thing is for, they basically label it as seed storage. And we find out the seeds in person are people. Stensen goes on to explain that the end of the world is inevitable, whether it be through some AI takeover, nuclear war, or nanotechnology. At some point, something catastrophic is going to occur where everybody dies. And in order to keep humanity alive, we need to keep some small percentage of the world population in these underground bunkers so that one day they can come back out. Some of the threats that humanity faces is listed here by Per Stensen. Nuclear war, climate collapse, viral pandemic, asteroid strike, artificial intelligence, and some that even he hasn't thought of. That's boding well, isn't it? Nice and cheerful. The one that is the most dangerous is also why he's the richest man in history. Of course, in terms of developing weapons and ways to kill people, you would rather create something extremely powerful that takes up an extremely limited amount of space than something huge, difficult to transport or even detonate. In this moment, as he's talking, for me, there is a trigger that starts to amplify this conversation, which leads to its boiling over in a few minutes. When talking about the nanotechnology and enemy governments, you can see Charlotte looks a little confused, almost like she's remembering something. She has the same look on her face that Jules did earlier in the season when sort of bits of her memory started coming back to her. I think in this moment she is starting to actually remember the Iran mission itself. We also get a little bit of a concept of a time frame. They're thinking anywhere between 1, 2, 3 or 4 years that we're going to get an initial information leak that they are going to be the one that causes. And actually they want Helen to be the journalist that leaks it. They even know already that the project itself is going to be released to the press under the name Stensen's Folly. Now we hear from Charlotte for the first time in this episode. She says, when you say enemy governments, that includes Iran? And he said, yeah, because as I feared, they created a nano program. We tried negotiating with them, we tried threatening them, and they set off a device in the Jules Tech corridor to set back our AI and our nano. Thurman continues and said, "We called it a dirty bomb because that's what people would understand." Now we know a little bit more about what press manipulation has already occurred here. Charlotte, poking Thurman with a stick, basically says, "What happened to my squadron?" Thurman continues, "Your mission helped take out a secret nano facility Iran built in the mountains near the Turkmenistan border." Charlotte, looking baffled, says, "Our mission didn't reach its target." Stensen, very weirdly, chimes in and says there was a cloud. The cloud that you flew through, that was their nanotechnology. And it took over your plane in seconds. Charlotte insists we didn't reach our target. This is why I truly think the memory is coming back for her in this moment. Because you can see Cernkovich, Thurman and Stensen all getting a little bit hot under the collar. They're all trying to diffuse this conversation and not truly let Charlotte think for herself. Anna goes on to continue, "Your friends, Daniel, in the Army Corps of Engineers, spent 2 years digging a 75-mile tunnel from Turkmenistan to right below the Iranian facility. Now, Senator Thurman joins back in. The second your squad came under attack, we blew up their facility with a low-yield nuclear weapon." Now, a very, very interesting look at this point is then shared between Helen and Charlotte. Remember, these are two characters we haven't seen truly have a conversation or interact with each other yet. We know earlier in the season, Helen of course tried to sneak into the Stensen clinic. That didn't go very well. And that's where we find out that Charlotte came to her because she wanted to reveal secrets about this Iran mission. And I wonder in this moment if Charlotte is remembering going to Helen, sitting in the car and discussing everything with her. Helen, fuming at this point, is getting very, very frustrated. She chimes in and she says, "You don't dig a 75-mile tunnel and roll a nuke down it as backup." The purpose of Charlotte's mission was to provoke a response, and then it cuts to Thurman taking just one glance at Per Stensen. She continues, "So you could see how advanced Iran's nano shit was. Am I right?" Helen's now got the two of them cornered. Meanwhile, Charlotte at this point is beginning to probably get a flood of memories coming back. There's even a moment where she turns her head back, almost sort of disgusted. She's sort of distraught with herself. And then this sort of PTSD response kicks in. Helen, throwing some more kerosene on the fire, says, "You knew her team would never reach their target. You just didn't care because the nuke was going off no matter what." Right at the peak of Charlotte's distress, she even adds, "Charlotte and her friends were nothing more than cannon fodder." We know there has to be more to this and that Helen's on the right track because, well, the plane's tech and comm systems were swapped out for something older. They weren't in any way going to allow for the modern tech to be possibly damaged. They were preempting this long before those planes ever took off. Charlotte, broken, runs off. Viktor Cernkovich runs after her. And Anna squares up to Helen, saying, "What the fuck was that supposed to achieve?" I also quite like the way she puts the emphasis on fuck, so I wanted to include it. I don't think they're truly upset that Helen has made Charlotte distressed. I think they've realised that Helen has worked too much out and now she knows too much. Before Helen can get in there to apologise, Viktor Cernkovich pushes past her to Daniel. He says, "Your sister could do with a memory of your parents right now." Daniel, confuddled, basically says, "Yeah, sure, but I don't have anything on me." And Cernkovich says, "You grew up on a farm, right?" After the earlier outburst, the dinner is continued. Helen looks over to Charlotte and apologises. These two still haven't barely made any eye contact this entire time. I'm desperate to see these two talk to each other and reveal some information. To me, it almost seems like they want to keep Helen away from Charlotte, but anyway, let me focus on the episode. There is so much happened here, it's ridiculous. Helen asks Per Stensen how much is this going to cost to manage per year, with the ego of, I don't know, a giant self-inflated pear, basically says, "Do you know how much a trillion is?" And it's 1,000 billion. He has $1 billion 1,000 times over. He explains that he's going to put 100 people into each silo and they're all going to be on about 200 grand a year. So he can afford to run this for 1,000 years. Also, as he's rambling about his wealth, there's a very, very interesting look between Charlotte and Anna. For a sec, let me talk about Anna and Charlotte for a second. Hang on. I cannot tell, I'm looking at them, right? I cannot tell if these two women are sort of truly into each other and they both have, you know, pure feelings for each other, or Charlotte is being completely manipulated by Anna, and at this point it's a weird case of sort of Stockholm syndrome. I don't know. I don't know what it is at this point, but I would love to hear your thoughts below. There's a whole discussion between Helen and Per Stensen about ethics, what this money could actually go towards in terms of helping people today as opposed to 1,000 years from now. Per snaps, I can't say Per snaps, I have to call him Stensen. I can't call him, but Per snaps. It sounds like a cocktail. Stensen snaps at Helen at this point in time, basically saying, what do you want me to do instead? Buy Iran? Well, that's going to stop one enemy, but it's not going to change the circumstance of things. An enemy over the next God knows how many years could come out of anywhere. We've still got threats basically coming from all angles. Helen asks, look, why are we here? And Senator Thurman turns around and says, you know, we want you to join the project. I find it funny as well, they say, we want you to join the project, but I don't know if Per Stensen does anymore. I don't know if he likes Helen. I don't know, I can't tell anymore. I've overthought this entire episode. Now they're explaining the details to Helen, Daniel and Charlotte, that they don't have to live in the silos, you know, within sort of a few mile radius. I adore how sassy Helen is, because she's like, wow, that's a good offer, but, you know, I just feel if it was the end of the world, I'd just, you know, rather be blown to shit. I just like the way that her personality changes, because you can see as well the two Thurmans and Per Stensen like leaning on every word, and then she says that and they're just like, oh, okay, all right, well, I thought we had her, but maybe not. They move on immediately to Charlotte and ask her if she wants to be involved in the project. Another interesting moment, both Helen and Daniel are staring at her looking for an answer. She doesn't look at Helen, she only looks at Daniel. Turns round to look at Anna and then makes her decision. Okay. So it's one no, one yes, and now they turn to the man in the middle. They turn to Daniel and they say, basically, Daniel, what about you? Are you going to join us here at the Silo project? Helen wants out. She gets up, asked to leave. Stensen says, you know, you can keep the $1 million, and I think deep down Helen couldn't give a shit. Daniel gives Charlotte a little sprig of rosemary and asks her to smell it. It helps trigger some childhood memories of her mother. I was quite shocked and amazed at how quickly the memories come flooding back. To me, this indicates that the relics are so powerful and dangerous. In the wrong hands, they're going to trigger a flood of memories for whoever is holding them. That's why they've had to be taken away from people of the silos and put somewhere else. Helen is on the helicopter thinking that she's leaving alone, but no, old Danny boy is going with her. She's trying to hide her excitement, bless her, that he also agrees that Per Stensen is cray-cray, as he uses it. I don't know why he's using a term from 2016, but anyway, cray-cray. After calling Per Stensen a mouth breather, which I loved, Daniel says arguably the most romantic line I've heard in the show yet. He says that he wouldn't want to be trapped underground with Thurman and the rest of them, and that he would want to turn to grey goo with her. And Helen's quite thrilled, bless them. Very, very sweet. I have my own theories about this. Something feels very off, because the way it cuts to the grey-haired guy watching the helicopter take off, and the fact that shot lingers on them, it all seems very romantic, doesn't it? It seems lovely. No, I've got my own theory about that. I'm going to go over it in a minute. Now, the interesting thing is when the algorithm is explaining that the bodies have moved and that they're no longer in the same place, it's because it was using surveillance drones to see this. Now, thank you to one of my subscribers and patrons for pointing this out to me, because I didn't spot it the first time around. When they're talking to Charlotte at this, you know, argumentative dinner, one of them suggests to her that she would be a good drone pilot for the project. This is when they're basically trying to bring her on board. Within this show, there is no coincidence, is what I've learned. There is no coincidence. So the fact we've heard of surveillance drones, and then the mention in the before times of Charlotte possibly piloting a drone, I find rather intriguing. I wonder if somewhere within the subplot this is trying to insinuate to us that these surveillance drones are actually managed by people, humans, possibly ones from Silo 1, or now all these 350 years later, are they now automated and run by this AI? Now, I said to you guys, there is something about the drawing that Bernard does of the silos laid out that doesn't add up. I'm even in my Discord server right now, checking with a few of you guys before I make this point in case I'm wrong. Now, when we take a more in-depth look at this, there is one silo in the middle that he's calling Silo 1. There are 7 clusters around the outside, and there are 7 silos per cluster. We have the 1 in the middle. We have the 49 around the edge. The problem is we know that there are 51 silos. So there is something in Bernard's drawing that doesn't add up. He even explained to Lukas that there isn't 50 silos, but 51, way back in season 2. Why has he deliberately not added this 51st silo to show Juliette? Is it just a mistake on his part? Is he getting forgetful? Is the vitamin D plus already working its way into his brain? But I would have thought Bernard, being as clever as he is, wouldn't have started drinking the water yet, so that doesn't make a lot of sense. He even told Carla not to drink any. I mean, in this moment, he's even willing to tell Juliette that he murdered Judge Meadows. So I don't really understand why he's being open and honest about one thing and not all of it. I don't know if I'm overlooking this too much and looking into it, but I'm interested in your guys' opinions as to why Bernard would have missed drawing one of the silos. Now, we also see in this episode, Per Stensen is talking about nanotechnology, and he sort of indicates to some level that it's his fault. We know that he has been funding AI. That was mentioned by Helen in an earlier episode, and I think as well he's been funding nanotechnology. We learn about this Iran mission, that it wasn't a dirty bomb and instead a nano weapon, and that Charlotte's squadron, in Helen's terms, is cannon fodder. Essentially, they are throwaways. They're not important to the main mission. They're almost something to be used, tossed away, and that those people in those fighter jets were purely expendable. I think not only could the comm systems be interfered with by the nanotech, but I think that's why it was all replaced anyway. They'd rather keep their most modern and precious technology from the fighter jets, replace it with some old, outdated ones, because they knew those planes weren't going to be coming back anyway. Charlotte said that her and Victor had been doing some memory work, and that they'd been sort of reinstalling memories for 2 weeks up until the Iran mission. And I think during this conversation, she is starting to remember more details from the night itself. And again, I think when Helen is reeling off all these details, it's only showing to the 2 Thurmans and Stensen just how much she is aware of. This is why I'm skeptical about this kiss scene and the helicopter takeoff at the end, because I don't think they're just going to get away that easily. But I wonder if there was almost a part of her subconscious that wanted that conversation to stop, not because she was traumatized, not because it was bringing up something so unbearable to deal with. I think in a way she was doing it almost to protect Helen. Now, again, might be looking into it too much, but the reason I feel this was because of that conversation Jules had with Shirley a couple of episodes ago. She's looking at Shirley and she explains that, although she doesn't really know her at that point in time, there's a part of her that she knows that would do anything for her. She'd if anybody ever hurt Shirley, she'd kill them. The people under memory suppression, although they don't know everything about themselves, it's almost like there's, gut instinct, some sort of core primal instinct that is still there. Was it that Charlotte was remembering how much she trusts Helen and wanting to protect her? Was it because in that moment she was finally getting some memories back from the Iran mission, or a mix and concoction of all those different things? Now, of course, at the end of the Before Times plotline, we see Helen and Daniel have a lovely little moment in the helicopter. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but the problem is, in the Silo Season 3 trailer, we see Helen walk into the silo. There's even possible indication that she's pregnant, because to be honest, she does look it in that clip within the trailer. We even get a hint of that because of the sonogram that is discussed in the ebook, The Mystery of the Pez by Robert Sims, that whoever brought the Pez into Silo 18 also had some other relics, one of which is an ultrasound photo of a baby. There is no way in my mind that the 2 Thurmans, Cernkovich, the grey-haired guy, and Stensen, in any way are going to let these 2 just fly away on a helicopter. I'm sorry, but there is no way in hell that they would let them do that. My theory at this point in time is somewhere between these events and the moment where we see Helen walking into a silo, she goes on the memory pills and she has her memory suppressed. My question at this point is, to what degree are people manipulating others? Is Daniel on the same side as Helen? Or has he, in that time, gone and spoke to Per Stensen or Thurman and says, you know, I'm going to make her change her mind. I'm going to go and kind of get the girl and I'm going to bring her back and, you know, we're going to come back here and work on the silo projects. Is he going to be the one that maybe drugs her with memory suppression? You know, I don't know. I'm only theorising at this point in time. I don't trust any of them. I adore these characters, every single one of them, but I actually don't fully trust any of them. I've just got to wait to see how things play out, I suppose. Now, of course, the big cliffhanger of the episode is what's going to happen next. When you go on Apple TV, episode 9 is titled Farewell. The entire silo is stunned by an announcement from Camille. Daniel and Helen attend a special event. Is she going to send her own husband, Robert Sims, out to clean? I don't know. The thumbnail shows Juliette back in her sort of mare outfit. The two of them look like they're stood in the cafeteria. I feel like somebody is going to be sent out. I just actually don't know at this point in time who that is. Is he being sent out to Silo 17 to learn something and discover something, and that actually Camille is going to start working with Jules and Robert? I'm honestly not sure. It's kind of too difficult to say at this point in time, but I do feel, given that this is going to be the penultimate episode of season 3, things are going to be heating up, and I think we can expect to lose some characters. That's how I feel right now. Before I wrap this video up, I am desperate to take a look at something on the howdidwelosethisworld.com. I tried to get on here about 24 hours before the episode came out, because there is a folder, but it's behind a password. Thanks to some people on Reddit and in my Discord server, we have now learned that the password for episode 8 is Rosemary. And now I can finally see what the photos are for this episode. Ooh, construction briefing. In addition to the active prototype, he's talking about the drill, development of 9 something underway. I'm assuming that's indicating 9 additional drills. Something construction. Could that say Silo 1 construction, maybe? I don't know, just having a look. And then we've got some great pictures from the before times. Ooh. We didn't see that in the episode. They were smooching, I remember vividly. What does that mean? I wonder if maybe this is a snapshot of an additional scene we might see next episode. And then when we click spiral and we get to the folder for episode 8, we see Solo and the kids, him working on the radio there, and of course Camille standing facing Jules. I'm dreading to think what Camille is going to do next episode, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Well, there we have it. That is all the bits that I could possibly break down and find in episode 8. As always, if there is anything that I've forgotten or little details that you would want to point out to me, comment them below. I will read through it as and when I can. If you did enjoy this, do give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out. What you can also do is click the hype button. If you do see it on your device, give it a click. It's completely free. All it does is push me further on the algorithm and allow for new people to find my channel. Subscribe, put notifications on, that way you won't miss anything, and I'll see you for episode 9. Toodles! How long have I been going? 69 minutes. 69 minutes. I've got to the bit where I'm talking about Charlotte and Anna and it's 69 minutes. Anyway. Almost got me again though. Almost got me again. Nearly teared up. I've got it on in the background. I don't do any notes for my videos. I just talk with the episode on in the background and just relay my thoughts. Nearly got me again. Nearly started crying, but it didn't. Haha, right. Where are we now? Now it seems to be, it turns out, the boyfriend. Mike? Was his name Mike? There's so many people in this show. Is Mike? Was it Mike? Editing Claudie with Mike. Was a scene between Kathleen Billings and... Why can I never remember his name? What is his name? What is Billings' name? What is his fucking first name? Paul Billings. Why do I always... I've been filming for 87 minutes. Ready? I'm going to get a drink and then I'm going to come back. There is a dog barking. Woof woof. Okay. Jules has worked her way up to judicial. Help me.